Challenge your potential and the sky's the limit. Join me, Emily Ibbott, in a diary to empower. From a starting point of a love for dance, my life has evolved, but along the way, I've learned so much in how we develop, learn and grow from those around us to elevate us even further on. Be inspired and be open to learn, and no limit will ever exist. Come along with me on my own journey in personal development, but with guests who have empowered me and are still doing so in my own journey. Hello, and welcome back. And hopefully most of you have tuned in to the previous episode with Zoe, speaking a lot about the competitive side of things and from her perspective, the judges side of things. Today I have the lovely Justine with me, and we actually just had a conversation that this is Justine's third podcast. Yes. I think you're the top guest onto it, which is really, really nice. And we just kept sort of, I guess, popping off with ideas for how we wanted to just speak further about this topic. And it's something we're hugely both quite passionate about. And I think from the journeys that we've been on, even more so passionate about, because it's knowing what's behind a prep. But also the fact that jumping into one or jumping into competing should not be taken lightly, and is kind of where we're going to delve into. And it is such a hot topic as well, because the season is just about to begin. And we've obviously both last competed in the same season, which is 2 years ago this year.
That's flown, hasn't it?
It's gone so quick. So many people have said to me, oh, you were on stage last year. I was like, no. Year before that.
I have moments as well where I'm like, oh, I was only reversing last year. And then I'm like, actually, no, that was the year before now. It's flown. It's gone too
crazy.
Quickly.
And again, that time perspective, prep one goes so quickly, and also like you blink and that time has also passed, which is such a big thing. For what it entails is a lot. And I think, we've both come from background of photo shoots as well prior.
Yeah.
Did you do a couple of photo shoots before? Like, how did you kind of go into that route?
I always feel like such a hypocrite when I say to people, I'm like, try a photo shoot first, because I didn't. Like, I just went straight in and prepped for a
Love this.
So
But that's not necessarily you. I mean, you're still explaining that experience
exactly.
as well.
So for me, it was, I joined with Abby, and it wasn't like straight into a prep. We did a little bit of an off season first, worked on kind of bringing my body fat down. Then we did a period of building.
Yeah.
And then we eventually went into a prep. And my first prep as well was in 2020. So my first prep actually got cut off halfway. So we kind of like sat in a weird kind of maintenance period for a bit, and then went on to compete in the later season when restrictions started lifting and things like that. But I actually decided along the way on my competition prep that I was going to do a photo shoot prep. So a little bit different for myself, like a little bit backwards, but I'd always say, try a photo shoot prep first.
Did you come into like the idea, obviously you were with Abby you said your prep was 2020, but did you started with Abby, what, a year or so?
A year or so before, probably a little bit earlier. I think it was like back end of 2018 that I kind of started with Abby.
And I think even that as itself is such a prominent thing to highlight, because like knowing your coach knowing you, having that relationship even prior to starting any form of prep, photo shoot prep or bodybuilding prep, is such a big thing. And I even know John said it multiple times to me, to have someone to just go into a prep isn't ideal because you don't know them. And I really, really understand that now. Obviously, going into a dieting phase with a coach is very, very different to going to just, can you prep me? Especially with a short notice of time. Obviously, it's very different on the male side of things, and females and timelines and dieting phases. It is very, very, very different. But I think when we look at sort of the grueling side of prep, it can get into some really tough depths.
Yeah.
And obviously you've done a couple of seasons. So you've done 3 seasons.
3 seasons, yeah.
And they all varied? Did they
Massively. My first ever prep was like, I was very wrapped up in the excitement of it all. Yeah. Obviously, I've had a different coach for 2 of my preps. So Abby took me through my first 2 seasons. And then I obviously went over to Amy for my third. So entirely different preps, completely different coaching relationships, coaching experiences. So it did vary like massively. But my first one was just so exciting. And I was like really wrapped up in the whirlwind of it all that I didn't really feel like I was dieting.
Yeah.
And I think also because obviously we were kind of like going in and out of lockdown, like restrictions were being
so
slammed
confusing.
down, and then they were lifting and then they were being put down again. And my first ever competition was like that close to getting cancelled, like 24 hours before he put so Suki, who runs NFM, ran NFM. I know.
Sad
times. But yeah, he literally put out an announcement like 24 hours before, and he was like, there's going to be very strict social distancing rules. Everyone in the audience needs to wear masks. You all need to wear masks backstage. So it was like a really strange experience, but really amazing at the same time, because like,
well, you're never going to have another one like
exactly So
I think that time just feels wild to even think that time happened. And it's not just as well, I think when you're in the excitement and when you're in, obviously, like I loved every second of my prep. Obviously the fatigue certainly hit at a certain point, but I did really, really enjoy it. And the same for you, you know, all your preps, it doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't tough times or tough parts within it, but you know, you want to be doing it and knowing sort of that you're loving that process. Otherwise, I definitely wouldn't diet for 4 to 6 months out of choice.
Gosh, yeah. 100%.
I mean, I guess it is 4 to 6 months of dieting is not something to be taken lightly, and especially where your body fat levels are coming down. Obviously, there are certain people in lifestyle where you gradually over a long period of time would necessarily bring those body fat levels down. But when you bring those body fat levels down to single digits, it is a whole nother level of what your body inside is actually going through. And I don't think it's something to be taken lightly. And I suppose even, look, you don't realize it as much when you're in it. No. Until you come out of it and you're like, damn,
that was stressful.
Yeah, what a time.
Yeah.
And it's, I think, really important to take in that, you know, your hormones are going to feel completely different. Yourself, like just the level of fatigue, I find that even I'm starting to wrap my head around. My days now do not look like how they looked before I went into my first prep. And I'm already nervous about the timing that I don't have. But, you know, obviously I'm taking that into consideration to fit it in. And especially to the end of prep, you know, you've basically got an hour every day of cardio. You've got an hour at least extra of steps a day. And that's 2 hours of your day. You have to put into it. Like, you know, you're choosing to do the prep. Obviously you're working with your coach to bring you to those levels. And you know, you've got to do the do, as I like to say.
Do the do, exactly.
And I suppose what kind of things started to, I mean, all your preps probably have gone very differently, but what sort of things started to highlight sort of how, like when you first did it, of like actually where, like, okay, we're in it?
Probably my second prep. My second prep was wildly different to the first. Like I said, the first one, I was like really caught up in the excitement of it all. And I was like, oh my God, my body's going through all these crazy changes. Like it was just wild to me. My second prep, I brought a way deeper condition. So for anyone that's watching that doesn't really understand that kind of concept, I was just really, really lean, basically.
And I always like to describe condition as like in simple terms, like more lines. If someone's got more condition, you can see more and you end up being like a little anatomy.
Yeah.
Like, you know, there's a little anatomy posters and you can see it. That's what you look like, essentially.
Yeah. But it also highlighted to me as well that I still had so much work to do. Like when I got down to those really low body fat levels, even though I think my off season between my first and my second show was only like 6 months, which now, like 1 star would not recommend. Like I didn't put on enough tissue. I then obviously leaned out and I kind of felt a little bit disappointed with like my end look. So I did 2 shows within that season. They were quite far apart. We treated the first one like kind of like a warm-up show. I wasn't conditioned at all. And I look back on those photos now and I'm like, oh my God, like I can't believe that I stepped on stage like that. But later in that season, we hit the stage, way better condition, so much leaner, but like I felt horrific. Like, but I had quite a lot going on. I was doing my master's at the time. I was working 3 part-time jobs. One of them obviously being coaching. And yeah, I just didn't really have the mental space for a prep that year. And it was such a shame because by the time I actually reached stage, I was kind of just like wishing it would all be over, which is a horrible way to feel. Like you don't want to put all of that work in to then finish a prep and go, actually, like I didn't enjoy that. And unfortunately, that was my experience. But then my third prep, incredible. Like I've never looked like that in my entire life. So that was like the cherry on the cake kind of thing. So yeah, like it's never going to be the same prep to prep.
And it is like, I really like how you highlighted the fact that, you know, don't wish a prep away, because I know so many people have met them halfway or bumped into them halfway through their prep and you're like, how's prep going? That is like the question you get all the time. But we welcome it. And it's like, oh, I wish it was over. I'm like, why are you doing it?
Yeah. What's the point?
You know, and it is, I always say to people, if you're not that bothered, don't bother. Like it's honestly not worth it, and it's not to be taken lightly as, I'm just going to do a prep. Like there is nothing just about prep.
And that's the thing as well. Like I'm seeing a lot more of it now. And this isn't me dismissing anybody else's like reasoning for doing a prep. I think everyone's got their reasons, but a lot of people are like just treating it like a bit of a challenge now.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, like great. If you want to do this for you and you want to hit the stage and you want to just prove to yourself that you can do it, I think that's awesome. But just kind of try and enlighten yourself a little bit of what that journey is going to entail, and also how you might potentially be coming out the other side of a prep. I think that's enormously, I think people get caught up in the tan and the glitter and the glam and
bikinis.
Oh my God, yeah.
Which are great, like, but that is literally, you only get that for
the day,
20 minutes.
Yeah.
And that is it.
Yeah.
I love my bikini. I feel like one girl asked me if I was selling it. I was like, no, it's my child. That is all fantastic, but that's almost the last part. And it is the last part, because unless you love the grind, the passion of training, of, you know, owning your progress more than anything else, 100%. and loving that presentation of being on stage and your posing and all those posing coaching, like one-to-ones, and, you know, your check-ins that you have with your coach and driving up and down the country for workshops and God knows what, you know, it's not just, I'm just going to diet and I'm just going to step on stage, because, you know, you want to bring your best to what you can do more than anything else. And I think going through that phase and coming out the other side, which obviously we did touch in our podcast when we spoke about reversing with Em, because all 3 of us had very, very different reversing like experiences. And I know Em would preach that to this day as well. And she'll sort of explain exactly the same. But, you know, talking about like food and your relationship with food, your relationship with the scales, your relationship with yourself, is something that is always changing, and that you can't, that is just constantly moving. But also on the flip side of that, you also have to be, like in life, you kind of want everything pretty happy. give or take. We can't help life from lifing is my favourite saying, because you can't.
Exactly.
But you kind of want to know that mindset's in a good place, work and balance and time is in a good place, your relationships, whether that be with a partner, friends, family, like they've got to know kind of what is going on, because they're going to be people that you go to or that are closest to. You know, it's all there's so much to take into consideration that I think that you can't just go into it.
No.
And, you know, it is really important for sort of everyone around you to lean on throughout. And it is tough. Like, I'm even tempted to get my parents on here to talk about those last 6 weeks of prep.
I think you should. You really should. I had a conversation with your mum in the gym, and she approached me and she was just like, Justine, is this going to end? Like, is this going to stop? And I was like, stick with it, Vicky. Like,
it's fine. And
she's going to be back to M.
But even my mum having a good relationship with you and with John, and knowing that everything around me was actually where it needed to be,
exactly,
gave her so much confidence, because she came away and she was like, okay, like, we're fine.
Literally.
And it's not even to say that I think the worst thing that I experienced, or not the worst thing, I don't like saying worst, but one of the highlights that I didn't necessarily like the most was my patience levels. But any other competitor will completely agree.
Yeah.
When you have God knows how many hours in a day that are completely filled from top to bottom, and then you go home and you want to do something simple and it doesn't go simple, that's it. You lose your absolute shit. And I think that's what I really struggle with. Like, if I drop something on the floor, that would be it. It would stay there.
Well, we were joking about it the other day, weren't we? When you dropped your protein on the floor and it spilled, and I was like, imagine if you were on
how
prep.
many situations I have, and I was like, if this was prep, I'd lose it.
Oh my God, literally.
And obviously we joke about it, but actually there is a serious level. Like, it's not normal to go ape
like, it is very abnormal to
go ape shit.
Respond like that. I mean, I've got quite bad emotional dysregulation anyway. Unfortunately, it comes with ADHD. Like, I do get very overwhelmed very quickly and I'll snap like that. Prep exacerbates that tenfold. Like, it is hideous.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, ask anyone, like ask my family, ask Morgan. They're just like, yeah, just let her get on with it. It's, you just got kind of got to take it with a pinch of salt. But yeah, patience levels wear thin on prep.
And it's, you know, you've got a lot going on. You just as prepared as possible, as, you know, locked in terms of your time management, where you're going to place your cardio, where you're going to place your training, how you're going to break down your day. If you've got, I don't know, even stuff with work, like, you know, if you've got traveling with work, if you've got big meetings or really stressful times at work, take that into consideration, because, like, I don't know, for example, I've got accounting friends. January is a no-go zone. Don't go anywhere near anyone who does accounting in January. Now, for them dieting at that phase is absolutely useless. Now, I know that's not obviously a time of a bodybuilding season, but it's that same principle that, you know, you have to kind of know how things are kind of going to roll. And I'm even thinking about events ahead in summer that, you know, actually I'm not going to attend. You absolutely can attend events in prep. You absolutely can go on holiday. I personally don't like to, because I want to be as close to home. The things that I've got, the gym that I go to, I've got everything I need very, very close by. Now, if you go anywhere on a night away when you're in prep, you take about 5 bags.
Yeah.
I take 5 bags as it is, let alone when I'm prep.
You overpack for everything. You're the queen.
So, you know, and it's those little things that really get missed. And obviously we've spoken a lot about relationship with food, and, you know, we build a lot about that with clients, and dieting phases, crikey, in general, because I think most people's today's views of dieting are absolutely fucked. Excuse my language, but they are, you know, there's that diet culture that has just absolutely bombarded everyone's life. And we're picking out those little things to try and build those bricks to be better, to have those relationships with viewing numbers on the scales in a better way, and with pictures and with data and the measurements. You know, we've got to really build that to a positive, because if you go into prep with a negative relationship with food and negative relationship with the scales, you're going to get a really big shock, because it will most likely come out even worse. And also how we view ourselves.
Ultimately going to put everything to the test. So if you are someone that struggles to like step on a scale, and that number will then essentially rule your whole day, you're going to really, really struggle doing a competition prep.
Fluctuations here, there and everywhere.
Oh, God, yeah. And it's a game of numbers. Like, ultimately, I don't like to focus on them too much, but to a degree, you are expecting there to be drops on the scale, and you're not always rewarded. Sometimes your body will just stick and you'll be like, why? I'm doing everything that I need to do.
And you've got to trust that process, and you've just 100%. Got to be like, okay, I'm annoyed that is the case, but I've done everything I possibly can, and I know that's great, and that's all I know that I need to do. So I need to come away from that, still crack on with what you're doing.
Yeah.
Obviously feedback to your coach, and their advice will be there. And sometimes obviously like fluctuations are so normal.
Yeah.
And it's so important to take into account. And it's not, when you come out of that in that reverse phase, it's tough. I even remember coming into the gym being like, oh my God, they're going to know what I've eaten.
Oh my God.
I like, it took me about 3 months, I say to people, to feel normal.
Yeah.
Just give or take. But that was the weirdest thing, that when I've come out of it, I've gone, that's really messed up.
Yeah.
Because no one knows what I've eaten.
Yeah.
Like,
and no one cares.
No one cares. No one cares.
No one cares.
But it's for someone that I find, like for myself, I don't really give two poops about what people think. And, I'm really passionate about what I do in prep and everything, and what I present on stage. Why did I care so much that I was, some lines were disappearing? Once I'd got past that point, and I was like, yes, this is where my healthy levels of body fat are sitting. This is where life is sitting. I can, everything's kind of regulated. The scales are a little less jumpy and up and down. As soon as I realised that line was a bit more smoother, I was like, oh, we're good.
I'm good.
But what if you're experiencing that and you've gone into prep with a really sort of negative experience, it's just going to be 10 times worse.
I think like the body checking as well. Like, I try not to body check as much now. Obviously, I'll take my progress pictures each week, kind of put that to the side and I forget about it. I'll do a little flex in the mirror when I've got a little pump on. But, if you are someone who does body check quite regularly, prep at the end of the day is just going to make that a million times worse, because you are chasing an aesthetic, you are chasing a certain look. You do need to be looking at how your body is responding visually, as well as obviously the scales, the measurements, everything else. So if you are someone that potentially doesn't have the best relationship with your body, with yourself, with scales, with food, prep is really going to ultimately put that to the test even more. So it's something that I was talking to. So I actually was on a really interesting Zoom call the other day with a friend of mine. She's an exercise psychologist, so massive background, and she's very qualified to support a lot of people through disordered eating, because I think in our industry as well, like it's very blurred, and it's a very like fine line. I think a lot of people do practice a little bit out of their remit, but we were kind of like just talking about this and how there should be more psychological support, especially in a sport like bodybuilding, because you get it so much in team sport. I mean, a lot of high performing teams now will have like a sports psychologist on hand, and they'll have someone, like a multidisciplinary team that will essentially coach the team players or that individual through their sport, working on mindset, everything else. And I feel like that just lacks so much when it comes to the behaviours that surround bodybuilding, if that makes sense.
I follow, I'd love to get her on, but she's not in this country, which makes me really sad. She's called the Bodybuilding Psychologist on Instagram. She
love her.
Is phenomenal, and everything she says, and it's so important to sometimes for those facts to just be highlighted to you.
Oh, gotcha.
Because, it's not some behaviors, like me going into the gym worrying that people know that I've eaten a chocolate bar like a normal human being should. That's not normal. Obviously, the more I was aware of it, I was like, okay, we're putting this to hush. And that's really important as well. If you're having these thoughts or things that, realizing that I can't quite there, it's really important to also raise that, which is why it's also so important to have your coach post-show. Please do not fly away.
Oh, I see it so much.
And me and Zoe were actually talking on the previous podcast that it's actually probably more important to have your coach post-show than prep. Yeah. Obviously, yes, you need your coach for prep. But it's really important to stay with them because those thoughts can be brought to surface. And also it can be a little bit rationalized as well. Yes, this is probably normal. You've been through an extreme diet to your leanest ever, your leanest of not the average. And it comes back to, where this isn't the norm, that photo shoots can be such a little taster for what that will entail. And I always say to people, I never actually wanted to compete, which is hilarious. But I did my first shoot and I was like, nope, but I loved it. Did it the following year, I got even leaner and I was like, no, I really love this. And it is exactly also why I know now I'm in where I'm meant to be and where I love and the passion behind it, and where I'm going with it. That might not stay forever, but at this very moment in time, it's so important. And obviously we do both. You've done client shoots and I've done client shoots. And I think it's such a great opportunity, if you're pending on the bodybuilding thought, to do one, because I've had different clients of whole different goals for a shoot. Some want to be super, super, super shredded, and some just want to be the best versions of them, slightly leaner, showing it off. Some people want to just have it there for that transformation, for that confidence boost. There is no one goal that's the same. So it's also a really good opportunity to see what sticking to a diet actually is like.
100%. And I love that as well, because I think a lot of people as well have this misconception that they need to be like ultra peeled to get in front of a camera. Yeah. And you don't.
So
like,
far from it.
I like want to just reiterate what that does for the confidence levels of someone. Like whether you're shredded or not, like just getting in front of the camera, you will look at yourself in a completely different way.
You need to do content.
Oh my God, yeah.
It's really changed the game for me. And it's such a confidence boost. And Massively. I think some people will say, oh, like, how do you improve confidence? Because so many people look at people and like, oh, you're just confident. But it's not. It's an ever-growing thing. And I was actually having a conversation with my parents yesterday. And I said, well, your confidence will grow from doing tough things. No matter what that tough thing is, obviously for us, and like it could be even with a client, they're actually just coming into the gym for the first time. It could be lifting free weights in the dumbbells section, for the first time. It could be just lifting a really tough weight, for the first time. It will build your confidence because you're like, well, I can do this, I can do it again, or I can do that, maybe I can do that. And I think it's putting your mind to it and being as consistent and as disciplined as possible to show yourself whether you're ready for those preps or bodybuilding prep. And it's not easy. And I think people are like, oh, it's really hard. And I'm like, yeah. Like even for someone in a dieting phase, my clients, they're like, oh, I'm really tough. Like, I'm experiencing a little bit of hunger. Yeah. Yeah. Like you will. And especially there's no hacks, more so in a bodybuilding prep, that you can do. Like you will be hungry or you'll, not necessarily hunger, but your body's going to be like, I'm ready for food again.
It's going to be fighting you at every opportunity it gets, especially when you're getting down to these like really low levels of body fat. Yeah. Everything is just going to be highlighted and just be blown out of proportion because your body at the end of the day, it doesn't want to push down to those levels a lot of the time.
Because it's not normal.
Normalizing it as well, like normalizing the hunger, like you said.
The symptoms,
and just like, I think making people so aware of that, like ahead of the game, and being like, look, you are going to feel hungry, you're going to feel tired, you're going to feel quite fatigued, probably a bit depleted, a bit moody.
Yeah.
Just set them up ultimately so they just know exactly what they're going to experience and just be prepared for that, because
You can't hide it.
No.
Like at all.
You can try.
And it's just so interesting highlighting all these points. And I always will talk about it to people. And I say to people, do your research, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to go into bodybuilding prep. My first question is, have you done an extreme dieting phase before? Or a significant length of time of a dieting phase? Or have you connected with other bodybuilders? Do you just know it as a pretty thing on stage? Do you know your federations? Do you know what category you'd be in?
Been to watch a show?
Yeah. I know so many people who've never been to watch a show.
Yeah, go and watch a show.
My biggest piece of advice to go, because it makes sense, because you're like, yes, I get it.
I think
get the
when I
structure.
actually watched a show, that was when I was like, I want to compete.
Yeah,
I want to do this.
This is my thing. And it really changes it and don't always expect your coach, if they're a prep coach, will have a lot of clients. They are not there to do your research.
Yeah.
And I know that from people who have been like, oh, does your coach not do that? No. I find my posing coach. I find my, the federation that I want to work with. I find their posing workshops, their tanning, who they're connected with. I speak with other competitors who are doing it so that I know the experience that I'm going through, or even if they've competed with that federation. I go onto the website and look at what their look for that category is.
Yeah.
And I think all of that is not, should not be taken lightly. It is quite a lot. You've got to take that into account,
100%.
and especially as a female, the makeup, the hair, the tanning process. Even I didn't fully know, when I clocked that you had to be stark naked for tanning, I got the shock of my life. I was like, okay.
I think that shocks a lot of people though. I think once you've done it for quite a few shows though, it's just like, meh.
Oh my God, yeah, you don't care about
you
that.
all stand there you just have a chat. Funny. It's such a vibe. I love backstage. You're all just
love the smell
naked.
of biscuits.
It's great.
And it leads quite nicely on into the price of prep as well. It's not cheap. And people forget. I wrote down a whole list of everything I bought in prep, everything to do with the shows.
Quite good for doing that.
Just because I wanted to visualize it and actually figure out how much I'm flipping spending. Now, that wasn't including my coaching costs. That to me is just a no-brainer. I will do that anyway. My supplement costs again, and my food shop. I need that. Food shop does change whether you're in prep or off season or just being normal. It does account for the amount of money you're spending. And I think without those three things, I spent $3,500 over time. That was from February to September.
Yeah.
But it's not cheap. So before you go into a prep, please take into account, actually, you're going to be spending money, let alone, I stayed away for one show. This season is going to be very different for me. But if you're staying away and staying in Airbnbs, it's going to add up. Obviously, there are cheap ways to do it. Yeah. You can make it, you can obviously work with a better budget. Being a first timer, I kind of did everything. Yeah. Because I was like, I want my makeup done. This is great.
Exactly. You want to make the most of it.
And the tanning as well. And tanning, I would always recommend to go with their tanners. It's just going to make
your first time
process a lot easier.
I say that though. I tanned myself for my first show.
But
my bestie at the time, she was competing as well. So we just tanned each other and it worked out. Impulsive as hell, because I think it was just like, oh, should we just do our own tans? And it was like, yeah, it was just normal. We didn't even question it. But then actually when I was going through the tanning process, I was quite stressed.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would definitely recommend maybe for your first couple of shows, just go and get your tan done. Take that stress off yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
I was very stressed about it.
And I found for this season, I'm actually going to do my own makeup, because I did my own makeup for one of the shows and I was like, smashed it. That's fine. I can do that.
It saves a lot of money.
You just got to take time. I will wake up 5 hours before I need to, just so I can.
You probably will anyway.
I
never sleep the night before a show. I'm like, morning.
I'm so excited. And so, just another thing to take into account. And it is a lot. And it's not, these things are not to be just brushed off. Mm-hmm. The price, the depths, the levels of body fat you're getting to, symptoms, is that the word? Symptoms you're experiencing. I don't know whether that is the right word, but everyone knows hopefully everyone knows what I'm trying to say, is such a major thing. And at the end of the day, if you're also not ready, or you've got halfway through, that's okay. If you've got halfway through, or you've had a really stressful situation at home or with life or with work or anything, no one is going to judge you for coming away from it. And the stage is not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Because you're going to put your body through even more hell, and it won't respond in the way you want it to if you are highly, highly stressed.
Yeah.
I've even had a recent conversation with my mum and dad. They wanted to go away in my peak week, and I said, I'm not being responsible for the dog. Like, that sounds really bad, but I don't want that. I don't even want to think about walking the dog in my peak week when I've got to send check-in photos after each meal. Do you know what I mean? Like, things like that. You've got to take into account where your timing is, where life is. And also it's okay if you want to pause it or come away, because the stage isn't going anywhere, and it's still going to be ready.
I think we're
when
a
you're
bit
ready.
too quick to judge on that front. Like, I do see it quite a lot, like, oh, so-and-so pulled out of their prep, and it's like, who cares? Like, if that person at the end of the day had to take a step back to prioritize like their mental health, or, you know, if they've had something go on in their family, whatever, like, there's no shame. And like you said, the stage will always be there. Yeah. It's not going anywhere.
Hugely. And I think that sums things up so well. And it was also really exciting to talk about such a hot topic. A lot of people are going into prep, and I think so many people worry, or so many people have questions. So maybe if you're out there, either a first timer or just curious about competing, hopefully we also haven't scared you off.
Hopefully not.
And we would both preach the sport, even though it comes with 100%. A lot behind it. And I will always say that, but you also want it to come from the right place.
Yeah.
Which is
I would never like discourage anyone from competing if it's what you want to do, but just
know where it's coming from.
Watch like vlogs as well on YouTube. I remember like before my first prep, sorry, I've got a hair on my lap. I don't know if you follow Georgie Pitt.
Yes.
I religiously watched her vlogs like through my prep. Like, cardio would literally be my time to watch Georgie, or I remember like I was
Jenny
following
Hamilton.
Like,
I watched a lot of hers, and I will never forget her. Like, she did a reversing one. I was like, wow, I've learned so much from this, because I think it was just after I hoarded a lot of food for my second photo shoot, which I've learned a lot from. But it was really interesting, because again, sometimes when you hear someone else's experience, you're then like, oh, like I'm cool, like that's fine. But no, and it's just reaching out. Questions, there is never enough, and your coach should really guide you and be in also a good position to prep you, to have all the knowledge behind and for the confidence, because they are your absolute rock through everything. And it's so important that they are confident with what they're putting you through as well, because some coaches aren't, and they'll put people on stage.
That's exactly why I haven't prepped anyone. You know, I have had so many clients ask me, you know, Justine, do you think you could take me for the stage? And I'm like, you know, I'd love to, but I feel like I've still got a lot to learn on that side. Like, yes, I've done 3 seasons, but it doesn't make me any more experienced at getting someone to that position. So
the stage is very, very, very different.
Oh, it's completely different ball game.
And also, I guess it's respecting sort of someone's decision. You know, I've even had people in one go inquired with me this week, asking sort of if I was a competitive coach, and I was like, this is absolutely not in my scope at the moment. I'm not saying it's in my scope ever, but at the moment I'm just a follower of a sport. I'm in the sport. I'm not a coach in the sport. A lot of these really, really incredible experienced coaches they've done it for 30 or 20 years. Like, they've done a lot of seasons. And also, I know what I relied in John, and the amount that he was just there on the other side of his phone at every second. Not that I have a problem with that, but the level of intelligence coming back at me, I'm not, blows my mind. And probably the same for Amy as well, you know, what you were sort of expecting. And Abby, you know, all that information, you know, it's got to be there for them to sort of push you into the right direction as well. Amazing.
Thank you so much for joining me again.
Thanks for having
I
me
imagine
again.
it won't be the last, with more ideas constantly popping up into our head. And obviously, if you have any questions for Justine or I, or you want to obviously jump onto our Instagrams, please do let us know. But yeah, super exciting. And hopefully we will see you on the next podcast.
A big thank you for joining me on my channel and tuning in. Find me on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, Amazon and YouTube, A Diary to Empower. Follow me on Instagram, m_power.fitness and TikTok, m.ibert. See you on the next episode.